What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we're gonna try something different in this video. It's like about 6:40 in the morning right now, and I woke up maybe half an hour ago, and my voice is deeper when I first wake up than later on in the day. And so I want you guys to hear what my voice sounds like relatively close. It's actually deeper than this when I first wake up, but it'll actually start to go back to normal as we get through this video. So I think it's kind of a cool little experiment that we're gonna do. But anyway, in this video, we are covering Superman Rebirth. And again, this is a story called Last Days. And this is really, really cool. This story focuses on the destruction of a planet similar to the events of Krypton, is really what this is about. Now, initially this picks up with Superman and Jonathan Kent in the Fortress of Solitude. And this is kind of cool because Jonathan's been in the fortress before, but really for him, being a kid, each time is like the first time. Like, it really is exciting and it's new and it's fresh. It's always really, really interesting. There's a kind of bond that Superman and Jonathan share outside of the fact that they're father and son. They are basically the last survivors of Krypton. They really are, in a lot of different ways. I mean, you have Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, so on and so forth. You got Krypto. But for Jonathan and Superman, they are basically they're it. They're the last survivors. There's a kind of part of his legacy that he'll never be able to fully grasp. Like, he'll never be able to walk on the grounds of Krypton. And that's what's so cool about this, is because what Superman's doing is basically sitting down and giving Jonathan this bit of his history and essentially a holographic recording of Krypton's destruction. The problem with this is that almost immediately after the whole thing begins, I mean, he sees, the whole situation over the course of an hour, and it is pretty grave in terms of how it impacts him. But almost immediately after this whole thing ends, they're suddenly met by an alert system. And this is actually pretty cool. What Superman had done is he had basically set up an alert system or programmed, the fortress to basically alert him in the instance that there was a planet anywhere in the universe that was going to face the same end as Krypton. What this does is it allows the Man of Steel to basically do what his father couldn't, to show up to another world that's going to be destroyed in the same capacity as Krypton and save it. It seems like it's a little more personal of a superhero epic than anything else. Now, of course, the funny thing is that Jonathan wants to go, right? Jonathan's like, oh man, you have to let me go, you have to let me go, you have to let me go. And of course, Superman's initial response is, no, you can't, it's really dangerous out there, space is a dangerous place. But ultimately, Jonathan convinces him. So Superman's response is like, okay, look, you can go, but like, don't tell your mom, which of course, that makes perfect sense. I mean, if Jonathan goes running home, right? This is why I love Jonathan Kent's character. If Jonathan goes running home, Mom, you won't believe what happened. Dad took me into space and we went to like a planet that was like 2 or 3 solar systems away. Lois Lane's response would be like, honey, you need to go upstairs. Dad and I need to have a conversation. Man, she'd rake him over the coals. There'd be nobody to help him. But when they get there, what they end up finding out is, of course, this planet is called Gallymane. But it's interesting. Once they get there, Superman kind of runs over the chronology of events to expect whenever they arrive on a new planet. Of course, he says, look, the Green Lanterns have been to more planets than I have. And actually, Trailer Drake has a really, really good, I guess Comic Drake has a really, really good video on where the Green Lantern of Krypton was, like why the Green Lantern of Krypton wasn't there when Krypton blew up, which is actually kind of a cool question that I never thought about answering before. But like, he basically says, look, like what's gonna happen is we're gonna show up, they're gonna be dazzled by our powers. Ultimately, people are gonna be a little fascinated. What passes for the security forces are gonna take us to their local leaders, and then we're basically gonna plead our case and say, hey, we're here to essentially save your world because obviously you probably don't know that it's gonna be destroyed. The exact opposite happens. Superman gets there alongside Jonathan Kent, and what's been going on here is basically like a religious fanaticism that like the leaders of the planet are like, yeah, we know the planet's gonna blow up, and like it's the will of our God to make it happen, so leave. Now, depending on how you view the world, you'll look at the story in one of 2 ways. People who are against any kind of fanaticism will look at this and say, those guys are crazy. Those guys are absolutely nuts. Whereas somebody else might look at that and say, but that's what they believe. Like, who are you to be so arrogant in your moral righteousness to show up and say, hey, other people from a world that I've never seen before, I know better than you do. And so you need to do what I want you to do because I know better than you do. And it's cool because it's 2 different conflicting ideas, both of which have validity that are basically clashing with one another. Superman showing up here is, look, your world's gonna be destroyed and you're all gonna die. But the perspective here is, yeah, we know that and it's the will of our God, so let it happen. And it's just like, okay, well, who's right here? Now, the initial response is, Superman's initial response is, surely you don't speak on behalf of the entirety of your citizenry. The response is like, our God wants this to happen, and if you don't leave, we're going to kill you. Of course, Superman's response is like, okay, look, unless you've got like kryptonite magic or like a red sun in your pocket somewhere that I can't see, then like, you're not gonna be able to take me down. And basically, that's exactly what they've been doing. They practice a kind of faith magic. It's kind of an ambiguous term to basically say they have abilities that aren't fully fleshed out, but basically they just start sapping away the energy of Superman and Jonathan Kent. planet. And the result is that they basically just kind of have to flee for their life. Now, ultimately, they come across a guy who's basically like the last scientist on the planet. And that's when we start to learn a little bit of the history of this world, that by some means or another, faith, or I guess a belief in religion, ultimately began to win out. And that's the missing link here. We don't really know exactly how it happened. All we know is that there was basically a point where religion won out, scientists became the minority, and then there was a great purge, and they basically executed all the scientists on the planet. And the result is that all you had left was faith. And so this guy is like the last remaining scientist on the world. And so because of this, the goal is to basically find a way to save their planet, to keep it protected. But notice this, and it's kind of cool. Notice this, when he takes them back to his lab, he basically has the exact same situation as Krypton. Now sure, Krypton wasn't necessarily, it was really more like ignorance, or it was really more like, this is preposterous, there's no way our world's going to end. It was really more like arrogance, as opposed to like a faith-based system. But the whole idea here is that they look at this, the scientist is kind of like, look, the world is going to end, and they believe that it's the will of God, Dermot, or whatever their God's name is. And so there's really nothing we can do to stop that. I mean, you can't beat, reason into them, and you can't even beat them to change their minds. If you do, they're doing what you tell them to, not because they actually believe it. And if you can't, then the only thing you can do is just get while the getting's good. The world's burning down around you, right? I mean, it's the classic example. You wake up one morning and the paint's peeling and the curtains are gone, and the water's boiling. What do? It's like, well, you get out because your house is on fire. And that's exactly what happens here. He kind of looks around and says, this entire society is now a lost cause. They're beyond hope of reason. They've descended into madness, at least as far as he's concerned from a scientific perspective. They're willing to doom all their lives because they believe it's the will of their God. And so now, like, all we can do is just escape. And so much like the story of Jor-El, what this guy's done is constructed a kind of stasis for the various eggs of him and his wife. And of course, he built a rocket that would allow them to escape. But the problem is that once these folks come barreling in, once all these different soldiers and community and so on and so forth come smashing in, of course, the rocket's destroyed, and this guy is basically injured in the process, meaning that Superman and Jonathan are really the only ones left. Now, the result is that, I guess because their powers sort of waxed and waned based on their faith, that Superman's powers begin to basically start to come back, and he sends Jonathan out, right? He's like, grab the eggs, take off, go to an asteroid, keep those things safe because those are the last of this race. Now, of course, this also sees this scientist basically dying out, and that's really about it. But Superman tries one last time because the tremors start to roll through. And so because of this, Superman tries to reason one last time, right? It's like, look, guys, I get that you guys have faith. I get that you guys believe in a power greater than yourself, but you guys also have to recognize that if this power greater than yourself gave you life, then it would want to believe that you will live, like it wants you to live. And if that's the case, why would you sacrifice your life? But that's kind of the cool thing, is the response is, you don't know that. There's no way you could know that. Like, this is our faith, this is our belief system, let us have our belief. And again, it's so cool because, like, you could look at Superman and say he's genuinely trying to save these people. But then on the other hand say, but why would someone so arrogant show up to somebody else's home and say, I know better than you do? Like, sure, you believe in a God, but like, you don't really know the way the universe works, but I know the way the universe works. So you need to follow me because I am going to save you from yourselves. It seems so exceedingly arrogant to show up and to say that, but it's not from a place of malice, right? It's not like Superman's a guy who travels around the cosmos and is like, everyone listen to me, everyone notice me because of how powerful I am and because of how experienced I am and wise I am, and you should all do what I want you to do because I'm just that great. This is coming from a place of genuinely trying to do good, of genuinely trying to save these people and valuing the sanctity of life. And that's where I say ultimately Superman wins out here, is if you have a battle between these guys who believe their God wants them to die versus Superman who's trying to save them, ultimately it really is Superman who's just the good guy here. He's trying to save a race of people who have not yet come to the realization that just because they believe in a being doesn't mean that being should necessarily encompass every single aspect of their life in its totality. And so with this in mind, like, ultimately Superman's just kind of forced to leave. They don't want to leave. They don't want to, survive the destruction of this planet. They believe that it's genuinely the will of their God. And so the result is that Superman just kind of has to leave with a heavy heart as the entire planet's destroyed. And ultimately, all that's really left are these eggs. But it's crushing. It's kind of a crushing thing, right? I mean, what this means, and really the lesson Jonathan's learning here, is you can't save everybody, especially those who don't want to save themselves. It's kind of a crazy situation because for the most part, from Jonathan Kent's perspective, with the exception of like a few isolated incidents here and there, from Jonathan Kent's perspective, he still has the idea that every single time that he and his father fly into some conflict on some planet somewhere, if that ever happens, and there's some race that's stuck in turmoil, that they'll celebrate the arrival of Superman and Jonathan, that they'll welcome them in, that they'll say, please, please save us. And Jonathan and Superman will save them, and the day will be saved, and there'll be like a parade, and all these great things will happen because by golly, they're superheroes and they're just doing the right thing. That's the image that he built up in his head in a lot of ways. But then suddenly they come across a race of people who don't want to save themselves. But it's interesting because Jonathan asks him this really cool question. He asks him, do you believe in God? And that's what's so interesting about Superman, is there are people who would look to Superman and see him as a god. But Superman's response is not necessarily, yes, I believe in God. His response is, I believe in something. There has to be something out there. Like, there's too much organization, too much structure, too much reason in this universe to believe that it's all just arbitrary. But maybe it is. And maybe there was just a prime mover. Maybe there's just a person that set things in motion, and then now we've ended up where we currently are. Now, of course, unbeknownst to Superman, yes, Superman, God does exist, and he's blue, walks around naked, and he's got the little atom symbol on his head, and he's absolutely gonna stomp the hell out of you and everybody else in the Justice League if you choose to fight him. Yeah, Superman, he's there. You just haven't seen him yet, but God is real, and you are going to meet him, home slice, and you're gonna find out how real God is. But it is a cool story. It is a really, really cool story. It's basically it's a coming of age tale for Jonathan more so than anything else. It's Jonathan learning the lesson that you can't save everyone. That sometimes no matter how hard you try, you can't save everybody. All you can do is save as many people as you can, assuming that you can save any at all. It's a hard lesson to learn, but it's a very important lesson to learn. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.